Alright, hello there. I apologize for coming in from outside. This will be a break from your regularly scheduled content to answer a couple of questions. It's cold. My nose hurts. I've had several people, now that I'm running an Etsy shop and 3D printing things for profit, please give me your money, shameless plug. I've had several people ask me how 3D printers work, and it's a lot simpler than people think. I'll start with the software side. The G code is the file type, literally called G code, is what we use on, in most cases, little SD cards. And that is basically a list of XYZ coordinates based on the known size of your bed's print volume. This is an ANET A8 Plus. It's very simple, it's very basic, it'll work great for this demonstration. I'm going to move my mic. That way you're a little more liable to hear me. Now, an A8 Plus is only different from the A8 in that it is a larger volume. It doesn't have any extra features. It is about as basic as they come. I haven't made any major changes to this one other than I have dismounted the power supply and put it on its own little separate stand over here, because normally it's mounted in the back corner over here. And my space here is at a premium since I've got two printers running side by side. Now, on back here behind this vertical pillar, you won't be able to see, is a small single board computer. That's the whole brain, a couple processors. It doesn't do anything fancy except detect temperature, count time, and XYZ coordinates. I'm going to turn it on. I've got a little switch back here. Nothing exciting. So you can see all the lights are flashing now. Maybe not. Too much light coming in the window behind us. My screen / control box is now on. It's not going to do anything fancy. It's a very simple 8-bit looking digital display with a couple of menus. It is as basic as they come. A lot now have touch screens, but that's not the point. One thing all printers will have in common is just the way they operate. So I have 4 stepper motors. This one here controls the Y axis, left and right. So this motor spins, moving this geared belt, which is what's going to slide the head left and right. There's one back here behind the bed, which has got the same kind of setup. There's a rubber belt with tension under the bed here that is hooked up to that motor, and that's going to slide the bed back and forward. And then there are 2 here and here which run the Z axis. These screws are attached to the end of the motors, so those motors run in parallel, and that will move this whole head assembly up and down on the Z axis. There is a 5th motor, but it does not move the head or the bed. It instead serves as the drive mechanism for this filament. This is some standard boring PET-G. I forget what that means off the top of my head. I've never used it before beyond this one roll that I've been using to print my own 1-gallon gas can. You ever see, like in NASCAR, for example, or I've used them in like Ultra 4 pit crew stuff, they have those big cylindrical over-the-shoulder gas cans with the like 3-inch port that you just plug into the fuel filler on the race car, and it's gonna dump all that fuel in a matter of seconds. And I think they're either 5 or 7, maybe even 10 gallons. I've seen a couple different sizes. Well, PET-G is a pretty resistant material, and that's why I've got this big mouth here. I'm printing my own 1 gallon can, baby can. That's where the rest of this roll went. And I'm going to use the last bit here to print a little dish to pour gasoline into and see just how resistant PETG is, if it lives up to what it claims to be. So in order to do that, I have the little SD card I showed you earlier, my G code, which is just a list of XYZ coordinates telling, this to move, etc., to specific locations. So that's already in the computer back there. So I'm going to push my buttons here. I haven't run this printer in a while, so first I'm going to perform an auto home so that I can check the bed level. So there's a couple micro switches here, and one in the back that I can't reach. So what it's going to do is drive all the motors to run all the way to the stops. And those micro switches should be just before, a millimeter and a half, just before the stop, the actual running out of space. This particular one, I have a build volume. My bed here is 300 by 300 millimeters, and then I believe my height is 350. So it's a fairly big space, especially for how much this thing cost me, but it also lacks all the other features, so you win some, you lose some. Now that I have reached home, I'm going to disable the steppers so that I can move these manually as I was earlier. But since I had given it a command to auto home, the steppers were on. These motors were active. They weren't moving, but they're energized, so you couldn't move them like this. So what I'm going to do, the trick I use, quick and dirty way to do it, so it's a piece of paper. I have an extra sticky note here, and just going to feel out. Oh, I got a tiny bit of old plastic stuck on the tip. See if I can break this off. Or not, because it's PETG. Now, as it's moving through the XYZ coordinates in the G code, this tip that I'm working on, there, I broke the old plastic off of, it's going to get really hot. Depending on the filament, depends on the temperature. PLA, I usually run at 200 Celsius, and stuff like PETG is going to be a little hotter. Nylon, you're going to be really hot, like 270 Celsius. Anyway, so there's a tip here. It gets hot, and it melts the plastic off of this roll, and the motor here with the gear drive is going to pinch onto this and slowly feed it into that heated throat to get to the tip. See, I can feel there's a little bit of resistance here, but it wasn't too hard to just slide my paper in under the tip like that. So it's probably still good, even though I haven't used it in 6 months. And who knows if the cat sat on it and threw off the level. That one's a little loose. So I'm going to adjust it here. Excuse me standing in front of the camera. So as the stuff gets fed down into the tip and melted, the tip is going to be simultaneously moving through that big old list of XYZ coordinates. There's also a heating pad here under the bed, so the bed is warm, so the stuff sticks to the bed and cools more gradually. That's how the part actually stays attached to the bottom here. And then, as it's a little loose too, moving through those XYZ coordinates, your fine tolerances is going to put down a little bead of the melted plastic. Kind of like if you've ever used a caulking gun and done the caulking around your bathtub. and you're going to apply pressure, right, as you're pushing it into that corner. It squeezes out a little bead of the caulk. It works kind of the same way, except the plastic cools and hardens really quickly, and so by the time you come back around for the next layer, the first layer is hardened, and you're just putting melted plastic on top of hardened melted plastic. Just like if you put a second bead of caulking over your first bead, it's going to get thicker. Now that my 0 is checked, I will select which G-code file I want to use. And you probably can't see because the screen is tiny, but down here it's preheating to go up to my settings. Because this is PETG and it's running a little hotter, my bed that I normally have at 50 Celsius for PLA, which is what I use most often, is now set for 70 Celsius, and it is currently heating in the 26, 27. To facilitate with that part cooling, there's 2 fans on the head here. This fan cools the tip that's heated, the heat element down here, so that way just the tip is hot and the heat doesn't creep up into the mechanism and melt the filament in the wrong part of the gear drive. So, that would be a massive mess, having all of that melted plastic in the wrong spot, up here inside this geared mechanism instead of down at the tip where it's supposed to be. And then there's a second fan, this axial fan, with this little duct that's kind of held on by this green tape here, if you can see, in my high-tech solutions. That duct is actually going to cool the part itself, so that as soon as the plastic comes out of that tip, it's cooled by the fan and that ducted air, and it's going to cool and harden as quickly as possible. Now that's not always the case, depending on which filament you're using. If it's like a TPU has little to no fan cooling, but that is, again, dependent on which type of filament you're using. Generally, broadly speaking, in most cases, that fan's going to be on 100% speed 100% of the time. See, now my bed's up to 43 degrees Celsius, and it'll continue heating. And once the bed's up to the 70, it'll heat the tip up to its set, and then it will auto-home again and start to print. The 0, the level I was talking about, having all 4 corners as close to level as possible in relation to the head. This is a standard 0.4 millimeter tip, and I'm running a normal large 0.3 millimeter layer height. So our margin of error between individual layers should be at best 0, but in this, a piece of paper measuring thickness method, you can't be off any more than like a quarter to half the thickness of a sheet of paper, 0.1-ish millimeters. And even then, that will affect the visual appearance. Here, using my printed gas can as a reference again, right? If you can see all these, let me get a little closer so perhaps you can see better. All of these individual lines is because my bed 0 wasn't perfect. It was off by just that teeny bit. So we get that kind of shadowing. But, now you see how big it is for a gallon and a quarter-ish. Just because I'd never used PETG before, but a lot of people talk a big game about it, and I wanted to see what was up, so I figured that would be a good stress test of this material. Bed's up at 58 Celsius now, we're still heating. There isn't really a way to make that more fast or exciting or interesting. It's just getting hot. Don't touch it. This you can touch, it's nice and warm, like it's 60 Celsius, big deal. But the tip is going to get between 200 and 250 Celsius. And that is hot enough, it will be a big deal. If you touch it. So, as I was saying, if you're within that very fine 1/10 of a millimeter tolerance, it's just gonna squeeze out a little layer of plastic that's melted, and this fan, as soon as it comes out, is going to cool and harden the plastic, and it's going to move around and make the shape it needs for that first, in this case, 0.3 millimeter thick layer or slice out of whatever shape you're printing. And then, these two stepper motors are going to drive the z-axis up, boop, another 0.3 millimeters, and it's going to do a second layer for whatever shape you need. And it's just going to do that over and over and over and over and over again until your whole part is complete. And I have been slow, and by slow I mean I'm playing this very cautious because I have not sat down and done the math to figure out my optimal tip speed for my optimal flow rate for optimal temperature with this filament. I'm just running a conservative, I could save time, the amount of physical time it takes to make a part. This cone with my little air vent was a good 14 hours for this one piece. The rest of it is just came apart, as you can see, is multiple sections. These were about 12 hours a piece. I've got 3 of those. Plus a bottom piece here that is the same, except it's not see-through. And this was about 16 hours, covering this big flat base over and over again. If you get really close, you might be able to see those layers that I was talking about. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. I'll get some good light on it there. But if you can see the actual layer lines, there, that way. So you can see the individual grains, like almost in a piece of wood, from where the filament ran, or where the printer ran and squeezed out the filament. It is not particularly complex or advanced. I mean, we've had functional 3D printers since the 80s. It's just now since 2008-ish where they've become affordable, small, and practical enough that average Joe Smo nerd like me can get them and 3D print parts for you. And now, my bed is heated. I'm at 70 degrees. The tip is going to warm up much faster because it's just a little piece of brass. It's set at 225 and it is now at temperature. So any second here, it's going to auto home, kick on the fans, and start printing away. Like that. It is as simple as, what I was hopefully explaining in this unscripted rant. I have in the software a set of XYZ coordinates and these stepper motors that are going to move them per those XYZ coordinates. I'll let it get the first layer down here just for your entertainment. Hopefully you can see that and there's not too much light coming in. Yeah, there is. If I can move that a little bit so you can see the bed here better. See this little red circle, it's put down the first layer already. It's just that teeny tiny little string of melted plastic comes out, and then this fan cools and hardens that plastic, and then it's just going to build tiny strings of plastic on top of tiny strings of plastic. The trick, the hard part is, in the plastic, the material itself, designing the right kind of material to get it all to adhere to itself, to rebind after being melted. Fun fact, it'll work with chocolate, to give you some ideas. chocolate cools and hardens. So, do with that information what you will. Now you can see it's made the circle as part starts, and now it's going through, just boring back and forth across to make, the flat. What I'm printing here using the leftover bit of filament is just a little dish, almost like an ashtray that I can pour a little bit of gasoline into and see if the gas destroys this PETG or how well it holds up, because it's supposedly very chemical resistant. Just in case it doesn't hold up too great, I've already got me a tube of fuel resistant gasket maker silicone stuff that I will coat the inside of my gas can with, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, I apologize for this not being a straight and narrow path, because it's scripted and off the cuff, and I've got all this other junk in the background because I have lots of projects packed here into my office. I'm a busy guy doing busy things. And now that it's actually run and I can look at it, see with my own eyes, tell you, the layer height's about right. My level, the bed level, the bed zero, whatever you want to call it, is, well, as I was showing earlier with all those shadow lines, not aesthetically pleasing. It's close enough to be functional. And as this is a prototype and a test element, functional is all we need. Which is why I'm doing them with the cheap printer and not this fancy guy that is printing a different job anyway. There's actually an order here for the Etsy shop. Keeping it busy. So now that I've verified it's sticking to the bed level is good enough to work, 90% of the time, once this first layer is done, the part will print correctly. And you can not necessarily ignore it, but you can walk away from it and come check on it every 10 or 15 minutes and not just have to sit here and stare at it the whole time. So, hopefully my meandering, unscripted explanation has shed some bit of light on the how do 3D printers work question. It's a very simple explanation for the layman that wants a little bit more, without me getting too technical into power supplies and transistors and all the other stuff and wiring magic computer bits that's happening back there in the corner. If you do have more questions, then please drop a comment. If this answered your questions, give me a like. If it didn't answer your questions, give it a thumbs down or whatever. If I'm too off the cuff, let me know. And if any of this or my other content on the various nerd things that I do, writing books, playing video games, participating in competitions, 3D printing for the Etsy shop, wrenching on grumpy old trucks, then give me a subscription, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And through the YouTube channel you can find the Instagram, the Twitter, and Facebook, and all the other things, Discord, where all of the content, it's kind of hard to congeal it all into one place. So, before I rant any longer, since this is coming out nicely, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your time. I'll see you in the next one. Party hardy. One other thing, real quick, to continue harassing you. Because this, as I was saying, is not part of my regularly scheduled content, I'm going to post this on Monday. Today, for me, is Saturday, December 30th. So Monday will be January 1st. So, with a new part, Happy New Year!